Three tails, old yin. Two heads, one tail, young yin. Two tails, one head, young yang. Just a second. Got you. All right. Young yang. Two tails, one head, young yang. Two tails, one head, young yang. 2 heads, 1 tail, young yin. The bottom or inner trigram of our primary hexagram will be read as broken, broken, solid. This is the trigram Gen Mountain. The mountain is still. It is a limit where you must stop. Gen brings each cycle to an end, defining a space where we can recognize, assimilate, and complete our experience. He creates a personal still center amid change where we can retreat for perspective and a firm foundation for new growth. He is well-grounded, confident, and of independent spirit. He is still and knows. Mountain is the youngest son, child of maturity. In the cycle of directions and seasons, he is the northeast, late winter approaching spring, the pivot between cycles. Our outer or top trigram will be read as solid, solid, broken. This, I believe, is Dewy Lake or Marsh. Dewy is lake and marsh, abundant energy that teems with life. She is the impulse to communicate, share, and exchange, and delights in both inner and outer conversation. She brings things into circulation and gives them voice. This is the sheer enjoyment of participating in life to the full, expressing ourselves and hearing others, and satisfying our desires. Lake is the youngest daughter, spirit of the fertile west and of autumn. Gen Mountain below Dewy Lake or Marsh give us the primary hexagram of 31. Once our bottom trigram, our first line of our bottom trigram transforms from young yin, or old yin rather, to young yang, it'll give us the trigram Li, fire and light, with solid, broken, solid. Li is fire and light, both inner and outer. As an inner light, she is consciousness at its most lucid and unclouded, holding things together in the mind, perceiving their differences and connections, and discerning the underlying patterns of relationship. And as well as vision, Li is the light that makes things visible, the power to cast light on things, spreading clarity and the awareness of order. Li is the middle daughter, living in the south, the region of midsummer and the burning sun. Dewy Lake or Marsh above Li, fire and light give us the supporting hexagram of 49. We will get the titles to our hexagrams from I-ming's Taoist I Ching, which he wrote in 1796 as a Taoist act. It's very alchemical in nature. Hexagram 31, I-ming calls sensitivity, harmonization of the celestial and the earthly. And hexagram 49, our supporting hexagram, which puts our primary hexagram in a broader context and influence, a direction of travel, an underlying issue that has to do with you and your relationship to it all. Revolution 49, refining personal desires to become unselfish. Let's look at each of our hexagrams with Kibi's I Ching Tarot. Hexagram 30. We just moved here and our cats are still getting used to the neighbor cats. 31. Kibi calls hexagram 31 influence. And in a little booklet, what is said about influence? Influence, love, sympathy, sensitivity, exchange of feelings. The sensations felt in the body, feet, calves, crotch, self, back, tongue. The top line, to be talking casually too much. The lake is symbolizes speaking and the mouth. All right. This character does seem pretty proud of themselves. I will say that. Which isn't always a bad thing, maybe. Let's see. And then 49, that's right. Revolution. Kibi also calls 49 revolution. Interesting. Revolution, revise, change, innovate. We prepare for the deadline and wait for the change to take place, but we can only realize when the change will actually take place after the reform. We will look first at Hilary Barrett's perspective through walking your path, creating your future. In her I Ching commentary, which is a nice beginner's I Ching commentary, which is also quite profound. Hexagram 31, influence is what she calls it. Key questions. When we approach the I Ching to consult the oracle, the question will always have the general context of how can I act in creative relation with the spirits or forces shaping this moment of time. Key questions. What influence is active and what does it draw you towards? What is its place in your life? Oracle, influence, creating success, constancy bears fruit, taking a woman, good fortune. Influence is what moves people and how people are open and available to be moved, by emotion or inspiration, physical responses or visiting spirits. All these things touch, stir, and attract us, drawing us into relationship. The Chinese character for influence shows a mouth and a weapon. The influence goes deep and makes us vulnerable. It is good to respond to the power of influence with constancy, steadying the motion it inspires and creating a place in your life to contain it. The man who takes a woman in marriage brings her into his home and makes room for her there. Good fortune comes from this more feminine way of relating, being open and allowing space for new influences. Image. Above the mountain is a lake, influence. A noble one accepts people with emptiness. The lake can form because the mountain makes space for it, yet still remains inwardly solid. With solid rock on the inside, there can be clear water above. Without it, there would only be mud throughout. In the same way, the noble one accepts people into an empty space. He ensures that he can hear and receive others without confusing his self with theirs. Sequence. The I Ching is divided into two canons. The upper canon ends with hexagram 30, clarity, and the lower canon begins here. Influence follows from all the hexagrams that precede it. There is heaven and earth, and so there are the 10,000 things. There are the 10,000 things, and so there is man and woman. There is man and woman, and so there is husband and wife. There is husband and wife, and so there is father and son. There is father and son, and so there is ruler and minister. There is ruler and minister, and so there is higher and lower. There is higher and lower, and so there is a place for rights and justice to operate. This is a creation story for the human world, how it arises from relationships, beginning with the first two hexagrams and culminating in harmonious ways to relate to people and to the spirits. It sets attraction and influence in context, showing how people belong together and complement one another. Pair. Influence forms a pair with hexagram 32 lasting. Influence calls, lasting endures. Influence is a time to be called and moved. It is always an encounter with something new. And our supporting hexagram, which puts our primary hexagram in a broader context and influence, direction of travel, an underlying issue that has to do with you and your relationship to it all. 49, Hilary Barrett calls radical change. Key questions. How can you break the mold? How must the form change to express the essence? Oracle, radical change. On your own day, there is truth and confidence. From the source, creating success, constancy bears fruit, regrets vanish. It is time for transformation. The old Chinese character for radical change, which also means leather, shows an animal hide. This is change like a shaman's, putting on a new skin to change your identity. And it is also revolutionary change. This hexagram marks the day when the Zhao people and their allies marched out to meet the armies of the corrupt Shang dynasty and defeated them. You change the governing principle and bring about renewal. In the moment of change, there is truth, sincerity, and a sure knowledge. Then the power of the whole, unfolding creative process from the source through to fruition and fulfillment can enter here and change the world. Naturally, regrets vanish, along with the past to which they belong. The new time is coming. Image. In the center of the lake there is fire, radical change. A noble one calculates the heavenly signs and clarifies the seasons. Badass picture of the tiger here. Can you say ass in a I Ching reading? The new king must realign the calendar with the stars, bringing his people's daily activities back into harmony with the time. The light of awareness is at the center of things, clear and unambiguous as starlight, and the calendar gives it expression. Inner lucidity illuminates and transforms a way of life, not bringing change for its own sake, but restoring a natural harmony. Sequence. Radical change follows from hexagram 48, the well. The way of the well does not allow things not to change radically. Over time, human regimes fall out of harmony with the way, Tao. Reconnecting with the unchanging source requires you to change the way you live. Pair. Radical change forms a pair with hexagram 50, the vessel. Radical change puts away the old, the vessel grasps renewal. Before you can found the new, you must remove the old. You may need to make deeper changes than you imagine. And our changing line 1, which puts a pin in the map to say you are here, or at least here some places you may find yourself, takes precedence over all other elements and is the most focused part of the reading. Changing line 1 has the general context, inklings just beginning to sense what could be involved or needed. And our primary hexagram, again, hexagram 31, influence, changing line 1. Influence in your big toes. Influence first enters your awareness as a stirring realization that you could be somewhere else. Something is pulling you, and with no clear ideas yet of what it might be, you only know that you have itchy feet. This is not yet good or bad. Nothing has happened yet. You are still standing where you were before. But everything could happen. Those small toes can set the whole body in motion. Even the very beginnings of influence open up to the structure of your commitments and relationships for far-reaching transformation. Next, we will look at our reading through the lens of I-ming's Taoist I Ching, which he wrote in 1796 as a Taoist adept. It's quite alchemical in nature. I-ming calls hexagram 31 sensitivity. Sensitivity is developmental. It is beneficial to be correct. Marriage brings good fortune. Explanation. Sensitivity means feeling and influence. As for the qualities of the hexagram, above is lake, joyous, and below is mountain, still. Firmness rests within, flexibility rests without. Stillness is the substance of joyfulness. Joyfulness is the function of stillness. This hexagram has the meaning of yin and yang responding to each other, so it is called sensitivity. This hexagram represents harmonization of yin and yang. It follows on the previous hexagram, pitfalls. In pitfalls, yin traps yang. Yang is not strong and yin is not docile. Yin and yang do not combine. So this work of harmonization is indispensable. But harmonization of yin and yang calls for spontaneity, not force. Spontaneity is non-conscious sensitivity, while force is conscious sensitivity. With non-conscious sensitivity, yin and yang harmonize with each other without any insensitivity. With conscious sensitivity, yin and yang are individually separate, and sensitivity has limits. Therefore, in sensitivity, there is a path of development. But though the path of sensitivity is developmental, there is right and wrong non-consciousness, and there is right and wrong consciousness. You cannot say that the non-consciousness of a dead tree or cold ashes is developmental, is the developmental path of sensitivity. Dead trees and cold ashes are purely negative, with no positivity. How could that be called sensitivity? Sensitivity means the subtle communion of yin and yang, as in the image of the hexagram, wherein a boy and a girl are together, each unminding, till the yin and yang energies are full, and their feelings stir, and they naturally become sensitive to each other. This is unaffected sensitivity. How can you take ignorant mindlessness to be sensitivity? Non-consciousness or mindlessness in the proper sense of the term means there is no human mentality. When there is no human mentality, there is the mind of Tao. The mind of Tao is a mind that is not minding. Minding means having the human mentality. When one has the human mentality, one lacks the mind of Tao. The mind of the human mentality is not the real mind. The mind of Tao is real. The human mentality is artificial. When you use the artificial mind, sensing is inaccurate. Yin and yang dichotomize. When you use the real mind, sensing is true. Yin and yang commune. Whether yin senses and yang responds, or yang senses and yin responds, they are equally ruled by the mind of Tao and sense correctly. When sensitivity is true, not sensing by mentality, what is there that cannot be sensed? What sensing is not potentially beneficial? In terms of correct sensitivity, no one in the world compares to a chaste woman. The virtues of a woman are based on chastity and calm, not easily losing herself to others. She will wait for a good partner to have feeling. This is feeling not by the heart, but by truth. In the qualities of the hexagram, first there is stillness. After that, joy. Joy comes from stillness. When practitioners of the Tao harmonize yin and yang, causing yin and yang to communicate sensitively, if they can take the virtue of a chaste woman as their sensitivity, then whatever they sense will be right. Tranquil and imperturbable, yet sensitive and effective. Sensitive and effective, yet tranquil and imperturbable. They rest in the proper place. Whether they go along with things or reverse them, all is as they will, and they attain good fortune. In our supporting hexagram, which puts our primary hexagram in a broader context, an influence, a direction of travel, an underlying issue that has to do with you and your relationship to it all. 49, revolution. In revolution, the sun of the self is truth. This is creative, developmental, fruitful, and perfect. Regret vanishes. Explanation. Revolution means riddance. The reason for riddance is obsolescence. As for the qualities of the hexagram, above is lake, joyous, and below is fire, luminous. Joy is based on illumination, while illumination controls joy. In joy, there should be no delusion, no illumination. In joy, there should be no delusion. In illumination, there should be no obscurity. Producing joy from within illumination, having illumination within joy, therefore it is called revolution. In the image of the hexagram, lake is metal, associated with the west. Fire is the fire associated with the south. Refining metal by fire. When metal meets fire, it produces brightness and is melted down. When fire meets metal, it goes into storage and returns to the root. This too is the meaning of revolution. This hexagram represents refining yin energy. It follows on the previous hexagram, exhaustion. In exhaustion, joy is produced from the midst of danger. This is how to take the true yang in water to get out of danger. However, even if you can take the true yang in water, if you cannot restore the true yin in fire, the gold elixir will not crystallize and you will not attain joy. So this path of producing joy from within illumination is indispensable. Producing joy from within illumination is the working of refining yin energy. Refining yin energy means refining one's own personal desires to become unselfish. Humans are the most conscious of beings, born with the true energy of the patterns of yin and yang, of heaven and earth. When they are first born, they unconsciously follow the laws of the Lord, completely good, with no evil. The true essence is bright and clear, the open awareness unobscured. Emotions do not stick in their hearts. Wealth and poverty do not disturb their minds. Wild beasts cannot harm them. Weapons cannot get at them. Water and fire cannot overcome them. Life and death cannot burden them. When hungry, they simply eat. When cold, they just put on clothes, without thought or reflection. Their capacity is originally clear. Then when people reach the age of 16, yang culminates, producing yin. As they deal with things based on acquired conditioning, they develop characteristic temperaments and intellectual knowledge. At this point, only sages of superior wisdom granted by nature, when they are not opposing nature in the primal state, and when they serve nature in the temporal state, are able to preserve primal reality and not be damaged by acquired conditioning. Among mediocre and lesser people, rare are they who are not ruled and manipulated by acquired conditioning. After this, 100 anxieties confuse their minds, myriad affairs belabor their bodies, they take the artificial to be real, abandon the true and enter the false. As the days and years go by, they become estranged by habit from what is close by nature, and the quality of clarity is damaged. The new piles up and becomes old, the pure becomes defiled. This is where the pollution of obsolescence and defilement comes from. If we look into the source of the pollution of obsolescence, stagnation, and defilement, we see it all comes from having a self. Once one has a self, an ego, the mind of Tao is obscured and the human mentality arises. Conscious of what one should not be conscious of, enjoying what one should not enjoy, one goes to any lengths following personal desires. So revolution simply means overthrowing the ignorance of the self to restore illumination. But if one wants to overthrow the ignorance of the self, it is necessary that the self first be understood. Once the self is understood, one can be sincere in revolution, and the ignorance of the self can be overthrown. Therefore, in the path of revolution, the sun of the self is truth. The sun is an image of illumination, understanding. Truth means sincerity. If one does not understand, one cannot be sincere. If one can understand, one will be sincere. With understanding and sincerity, as the first thought is truthful, one will be able to overthrow and revolutionize the self. Therefore, revolution contains a path of creativity and development. However, though revolution is creative and developmental, it is necessary that revolution be correct. If right and wrong are not differentiated, and true and false are not distinguished, but all are overthrown together, and one enters into nihilistic quietism, this is not correct and so is not fruitful. And not being fruitful, it is not creative or developmental. Only by correct revolution, conquering the ego and returning to propriety, getting rid of falsehood and maintaining truthfulness, burning away all the pollution of conditioning and bringing to light the true essence of the primal unified awareness, reaching this state, returning to the fundamental, integrating with natural principle, pure and clean, without flaw, can the regret of having a self vanish. This path is not hard to know. What is hard is to carry it out. It is simply a matter of people being able to be sincere in revolution. Next, we will look at our changing line 1, which puts a pin in the map to say you are here, or at least here are some places you may find yourself. It takes precedence over all other elements and is the most focused part of the reading. Changing line 1 has the general context, inklings, just beginning to sense what could be involved or needed. Hexagram 31, changing line 1. Sensing in the big toe is inauspicious. Explanation. When one is foolish and low-minded, unable to refine the self and discipline the mind, to arbitrarily imagine great things is like sensing in the big toe. The big toe can move but not walk. To feel something one cannot carry out is not right sensing. This is sensitivity that stirs the human mentality. And I don't know why that makes me think of, why men great, so they're gonna be great. It's like projecting out the idea of greatness into the future, which takes us away from the mind of Tao. Our primary hexagram we will read in the commentary section, 31. Sensing. Lake above, mountain below. The commentary section might be a little bit more alchemical. There is a lake on a mountain, thus does the superior person accept people with openness. Sensing means feeling. Above is lake, below is mountain. There is a lake on a mountain. A lake is open, a mountain is high. To be high yet capable of openness, this is the image of sensing. What superior people see in this is that just as there can be no lake atop a mountain if there is no open space, similarly, people can't be sensitive to anything if their minds are not open. Therefore, they empty themselves of what they have and receive enhancement from another. The Taoist master Zhu Yang said, "Stop exercising clever artifice as though it were effective practice. Recognize the other's method of immortality." The other is another person, but it does not mean an ordinary person in the world. It means the original immortal true person, inherent in oneself. Because of mixing with acquired conditioning, it has run away and become ineffective. Long covered up and buried away, it is lost and does not return. Though it may show up occasionally, students who cling to the temporal, who stick to the conditioned, miss it even when it is right before them and are unable to sense it. This is all because of inability to refine the self. If one is unable to refine oneself, personal desires fill the being, and their sprouts clog the opening of awareness. Being filled and not open, whenever another comes, there is no room for reception. Superior people who practice the Tao refine themselves and master their minds, getting rid of all acquired pollutants so that their minds are open. When the mind is open, the primordial energy comes from nothingness, so that one can receive enhancement from the other and become fulfilled. One senses by openness, the other responds with fulfillment. The small goes and the great comes. The gold elixir of immortality spontaneously crystallizes. This is like a high mountain being empty and open on top and receiving the moisture of a lake. It happens spontaneously, without any intention that it be so. In our supporting hexagram 49, which puts our primary hexagram in a broader context and influence a direction of travel, an underlying issue that has to do with you and your relationship to it all. 49, change. Lake above, fire below. There is fire in a lake, changing. Thus do superior people make a calendar and clarify the seasons. Change is transformation. Above is lake, below is fire. There is fire in a lake. A lake is wet, fire is hot. If there is too much moisture, fire will dry it up. If there is too much heat, moisture will dampen it down. When moisture and fire are in the same place, the wetness and heat balance each other. This is the image of change. What superior people see in this is that as people establish their careers in the world, when they cannot achieve proper adjustment based on actualities and cannot adapt to the times, it is because they do not understand the principle of change of the celestial Tao and the seasons of advance and withdrawal of yin and yang. Therefore, superior people divide the various seasons of spring, summer, autumn, and winter with their 24 energies and 72 periods, and thus make a calendar to show that the operation of the energies of the 5 elements each has its own time, to enable people to obey heaven and accord with the time, changing any element that is excessive so that it returns to correct balance. Heaven has its times of operation. People have times when they should act. As the time changes, the way changes. So the way of change is the way of going along with the time. When one acts appropriately in concert with the time, action and inaction, preservation and elimination will not lose their proper balance. This too is one kind of celestial practice. Next, we will look at I-ming's Taoist I Ching. Nope, sorry, we just did that. James de Corn's Gnostic Book of Changes, which I've left links to in the description box below. He is a practitioner of the Tao himself and has left helpful editor's notes throughout. He has synthesized several I Ching commentaries in this one helpful place here, and gives quotes from people like Carl Jung and things like the Kabbalah. He calls Hexagram 31 initiative or influence. Other titles might be influence, wooing, attraction, sensation, stimulation, conjoining, feelings, sensitivity, sensing, affection, influencing to action, tension, seeking union, persuasion, courting response, and importuning, judgment, leg. Upon fulfillment of the conditions implied in initiative, there will be free course and success. Advantage depends upon firm correctness, as in marrying a young lady, good fortune. Wilhelm/Bain's influence, success. Perseverance furthers. To take a maiden to wife brings good fortune. Ritzimo/Karcher, conjoining, growing, harvesting trial, grasping womanhood, significant. This hexagram describes your situation in terms of the influence that separated parts of an intrinsic whole have on each other. It emphasizes that bringing these parts into contact is the adequate way to handle this situation. Cleary 2, sensing gets through, beneficial if correct, marriage is auspicious. The image, leg. The image of a marsh over a mountain forms initiative. The superior man frees his mind of preoccupation so that he is open to the influence of others. Literally, thus the superior man receives people by virtue of emptiness. Wilhelm/Bain's, a lake on the mountain, the image of influence. Thus the superior man encourages people to approach him by his willingness to receive them. Blofeld. This hexagram symbolizes a lake situated upon a mountain. In dealing with men, the superior man shows himself to be entirely void of selfishness. Lu. The lake on top of the mountain symbolizes attraction. With a humble manner, the superior man receives people. Ritzimo/Karcher, above mountain possessing marsh, conjoining. A Chunsu or superior person, or chief son, uses emptiness to acquiesce people. Wu, there is a marsh in the mountain. This is affection. Thus the Chunsi, or chief son or superior person, receives people with humility. Commentary. Confucius/Leg. Initiative is here used in the sense of mutually influencing. The magnetic trigram is above and the dynamic trigram is below. Their two influences move, respond, and unite with each other. The male is placed below the female. His repression is her satisfaction and brings fulfillment. Advantage depends upon firm correctness, as in the marrying of a young lady. Heaven and earth stimulate each other, and all things attain birth. The sages stimulate the minds of men, and harmony is born. If we examine the pattern of these influences, the nature of heaven and earth is revealed. Leg. The lines of the hexagram all deal with moving or influencing to movement, and the figure is an essay on the different ways of creating an influence and the results engendered thereby. The lower trigram of the youngest son supports the upper trigram of the youngest daughter in happy union. This is correct because the lower trigram, here yang, should always take the initiative. No influence is so powerful and constant as that between husband and wife, and where they are both young, it is especially active. Therefore, mutual influence, correct in itself, and for correct ends, is sure to be effective. Notes and paraphrases. Judgment. Initiative succeeds only when it originates from the self. The superior man clears his mind and remains receptive to the will of the self. Wilhelm's translation of the name of this hexagram is influence, but I have chosen initiative to emphasize the idea of the proper source of the influence implied in the symbolism. Webster's Third New International Dictionary defines initiative as follows. Initiative 1. An introductory step or movement, an act designed to originate or set on foot as a process or train of events. Often used in the phrase, on one's own initiative, as in, don't blame me, he acted on his own initiative. The judgment states that the situation can be furthered only by the firm correctness associated with the proper contracting of a marriage. We already know that the symbolism of marriage refers to a union of opposites within the psyche. To understand what is meant by the proper contracting of a marriage, we need only look at hexagram number 54, propriety, or the marrying maiden, to see the improper way to do it. That is, when the woman takes the initiative. Far from being a sexist idea, the symbolism reveals a profound archetypal truth. The polarity of forces in the psyche shows the ego as magnetic to the dynamic self. That is, the conscious ego complex in any psyche, male or female, is feminine, or magnetic in relation to the self, which is masculine or dynamic. In the I Ching, the self is symbolized by heaven and the ego is symbolized by earth. This primordial relationship between the two qualities is found in many symbol systems. Here's the Kabbalistic version, a quote from D. Fortune in the Mystical Kabbalah. This clearly indicates the function of polarity that prevails between the planes of form and the planes of force. The planes of form being the female aspect, polarized and made fertile by the influences of the planes of force. The Hermetic tradition describes it this way, a quote from the Kabbalion. There is this dual aspect in the mind of every person. The I, self, represents the masculine principle of mental gender. The me, ego, represents the female principle. In the contracting of a marriage between heaven and earth, uniting the polarities within the divided psyche, the ego must learn, usually through great suffering, that its correct role is a magnetic one in relation to that of the self. The work cannot progress until this lesson has been learned and accepted completely. As long as the ego insists on taking dynamic initiative, as usual in the illusory world of appearances, the results can only be the kind of objective world we inhabit, one of chaos and strife. The lesson of this hexagram, then, is the realization that the only correct source of power lies with the self, and that the ego must yield to that source as a bride to her bridegroom. Unfortunately, the contemporary relationship between the sexes has become so confused that this metaphor is seldom effective in conveying the profound truth it represents. The self, or the causal body of theosophy, dwells beyond the restrictions of space-time and is preeminently suited for directing the work, since it can see ahead, so to speak, and it knows the effects of all the available choices. The ego, on the other hand, dwells in space-time and is able to take action. By its choices, it makes or breaks the work. The ideal reciprocity between ego and self is a simple and logical division of labor. The self can see ahead but cannot take direct action, and the ego can take direct action but cannot see ahead. For the ego to act without direction from the self is to grope blindly in the dark, and the work clearly cannot progress under such circumstances. The superior man, therefore, clears his mind and remains receptive to the will of the self. Obviously, it takes time to learn how to do this properly. In its initial stages, that's what the work is all about. A quote from the Kabbalion: The majority of people are more or less the slaves of heredity, environment, etc., and manifest very little freedom. They are swayed by the opinions, customs, and thoughts of the outside world, and also by their emotions, feelings, moods, etc. They manifest no mastery worthy of the name. The second and third sentences in the Confucian commentary elicit the sexual symbolism in this hexagram quite clearly. The female trigram is above, the male trigram is below. Their two influences move, respond, and unite with each other. The male is placed below the female. His repression is her satisfaction and brings fulfillment. Blofeld comments on this in a footnote. I doubt if this should be regarded as shedding light upon the ancient Chinese concept of the most acceptable position for intercourse. It is more likely to mean that the girl is able to depend upon the man as a plant depends upon the earth for its nourishment. Symbolism works on many levels, and Blofeld's aborted insight does apply to some of them. It is an established fact that the sentences in question accurately describe tantric sexual techniques practiced in the Orient for millennia. To understand the principles of the work, we must be able to see the obvious as symbolic of an abstraction, and vice versa. Sexual polarity is a very tricky and volatile symbol because we are predisposed to confine it to its most literal meaning. The hardest part of a symbolic interpretation is to know where in the continuum a specific symbol belongs in any given situation. Without changing lines, this hexagram suggests that you examine your impulses and motivations to act and see if they are truly in accordance with the goals of the work. The figure can sometimes take on the meaning of importuning, to press or urge with frequent or unreasonable requests or troublesome persistence. In other words, you might be importuning the oracle for answers, which it is of no mind to give you. It is also significant to note that every line has a more or less negative connotation. These are all very strong warnings to the ego to control its compulsive need to take the initiative, to influence the situation. Calm down. Reality is not what it appears to be. Please allow the self to direct the work. Suggestions for meditation. Compare the concepts in this hexagram with hexagram number 54, propriety, number 53, gradual progress, and number 11, harmony. How do they all deal with the symbol of marriage as an aspect of the work? Compare the first three lines with hexagram number 52, keeping still. Initiative is the first hexagram of part 2 of the I Ching. Why do you suppose the book was divided into 2 unequal sections? Why did the division appear between the 30th and 31st hexagrams? An even division would be between the 32nd and 33rd. A quote from Feng Yulan in A Short History of Chinese Philosophy. The I Ching was originally divided into 2 books. Appendix 6 considers the first of these as dealing with the world of nature, and the second as dealing with that of man. What insights does the alchemical concept of the unus mundus bring to bear on these questions? And our supporting hexagram, which puts our primary hexagram in a broader context and influence, a direction of travel, an underlying issue that has to do with you and your relationship to it all. James DeCorn calls hexagram 49 metamorphosis. Other titles might be revolution or revolutions, transformation, skinning, the bridle, the symbol of change, molting, leather, skin, molt, cut off, changing, radical change, overthrowing. Judgment, leg. Metamorphosis is believed in only after it has been accomplished. Firm correctness abolishes regret and brings successful progress. Wilhelm Sachsbane's revolution. On your own day you are believed. Supreme success. Furthering through perseverance. Remorse disappears. Blofeld. Revolution. Not before the day of its completion will men have faith in it. Sublime success. Determination in a righteous course brings reward. Regret vanishes. Very often this means renovation as of character, etc., but it may also mean exactly what it says, Confucius, though he regarded loyalty to the ruler as one of the highest virtues, recognized that evil men forfeit their right to rule by their excesses, and it is probable that this notion antedates him by many centuries. Lu, revolution. When the appropriate day comes, the people will believe in it. Great success. It is beneficial to continue. Remorse vanishes. Ritsumasashkarcher, skinning, before zenith sun, thereupon conforming. Spring growing, harvesting trial, repenting extinguished. This hexagram describes your situation in terms of stripping away a protective cover. It emphasizes that radically changing and renewing the way you present yourself is the adequate way to handle it. Slofnacy, the bridle. On the sea day, then return, prime receipt, beneficial to determine, regret is gone. Clary 1, in revolution, the sun of the self is truth. This is creative, developmental, fruitful, and perfect. Regret vanishes. In old texts, when it says that the alchemical elixir is in people, but first they have to refine the self and wait for the proper time, this means to make a radical purge of all the pollution of past influences and not let any flaws remain in the heart. Wu, reform indicates that revolution will become credible when the time is ripe. In this way, it is great and pervasive and advantageous to be persevering. Regret will disappear. The image, leg, a fire in the marsh, the image of metamorphosis. The superior man synchronizes his astronomical calculations to clarify the times and seasons. Wilhelm Sashbane's fire in the lake, the image of revolution. Thus, the superior man sets the calendar in order and makes the seasons clear. Blowfold, this hexagram symbolizes fire rising from a marshy lake. The superior man regulates the calendar and thus ensures that men are clear about times and seasons. Ritsumasashkarcher, marsh center possessing fire, skinning. A chunsu or chief son or superior person uses regulating time reckoning to brighten the seasons. Wu, there is fire below the marsh, this is reform. Thus the chunsi is inspired to develop a calendrical system for keeping time. Commentary, Confucius/Leg, in metamorphosis, water and fire extinguish each other. When two daughters with opposing viewpoints live together, change is inevitable. But after the change is accomplished, faith is accorded to it. Clarity brings good cheer and progress through what is correct. When a transformation is properly accomplished, all occasion for regret disappears. Heaven and earth undergo their changes, and the four seasons complete their functions. The rulers of old transformed the state in accordance with the will of heaven and in response to the wishes of men. Great indeed is what takes place in a time of change. Leg. The written character translated as metamorphosis is used here in the sense of changing. Originally used for the skin of an animal or bird, it received the significance of changing at a very early time. The figure deals with the subject of changes which are all called for in the state of the country. The necessity for change is recognized, and hints are given as to the spirit and manner in which they should be brought about. The judgment assumes that change is viewed by people generally with suspicion and dislike, and therefore should not be made hastily. This can refer to inner complexes, habits, etc. When the necessity for change has been proven beforehand and subsequently carried out with firm correctness, then the issue will turn out satisfactorily. The lower trigram is the symbol of fire and the upper for water. Water extinguishes fire and fire dries up water. Each changes the other. The lower trigram is also the second daughter and the upper is the youngest daughter. In the scheme of the trigrams, these two are seen to be mutually incompatible. Notes and paraphrases. Judgment. Hidden within its cocoon, the caterpillar becomes a butterfly. Who would believe it until the metamorphosis was complete? The superior man recognizes that celestial sequences create changes only when they are due. He therefore acts in accordance with the requirements of the times. The 49th hexagram makes an analogy between the natural metamorphosis of animal pelts and the proper way to regard radical changes in government. Lines 1, 5, and 6 all refer to skin, and 2, 3, and 4 refer to politics. The general idea is that radical transformations occur at their own natural pace. They cannot be successfully forced any more than eggs can be made to hatch before their time. The image makes this point in its reference to the celestial correlation of the seasons. A quote from Ecclesiastes 3, 1 through 2. There is a time for everything. A time for every occupation under heaven. I just quoted this. I did a collaboration with someone that should be potentially coming out here shortly, but this was brought up. A time for giving birth, a time for dying, a time for planting, a time for uprooting what has been planted. Once one assumes conscious responsibility for the work, there comes a long and indefinite period in which one labors unceasingly without any visible results at all. Dream images and I Ching meditations will indicate that progress is being made, but the ego's life in space-time consists of seemingly fruitless labor in the service of a transcendental ideal. This is a universal experience. It happens to everyone who undertakes the work. In the Western mystery tradition, it is known as the dark night of the soul. See hexagram number 36 for further insights into this unavoidable phenomenon. A quote from Rowan in the Kabbalistic Tarot. The personality undergoes a willful death, surrendering everything that it believes itself to be. Most difficult is that this total surrender of life, this initiatory sacrifice, must precede the experience of cosmic awareness. One is required to give up the totality of one's being, one's very life, in relative darkness, yet in the faith that there will be a resurrection into the light. Psychologically interpreted, metamorphosis means that changes are taking place in the unconscious psyche, but don't expect them to manifest until their growth is complete. The ego must recognize this and persevere with the work, even when common sense counsels otherwise. It is a period of probation and trial, and many there are who failed the test. A quote from ZBS Halevi in Kabbalah and Exodus. There is no shortcut without impeding growth or setting the flow pattern of the soul back until each physical or psychological function has been correctly connected or developed. Many aspirants do not perceive this law and become impatient and even lose faith when providence seems to be holding back. Nothing occurs outside its time, as it is part of a sequence in the great cosmic cycle that unfolds the grand design of existence. If there is any consolation in this terrible ordeal, it is that others have made the journey before you and survived. Keep the faith that in the imagery of this hexagram, the lower trigram of clear perception, following the upper trigram of cheerfulness, will lead you through the most challenging of all transformations. A quote from E.C. Whitmont in The Symbolic Quest. Where the issue of ultimate meaning is constellated, transformation will eventually occur, even though only by way of a great deal of suffering. And we will next look at our changing line 1, which puts a pin in the map to say you are here, or at least here some places you may find yourself, takes precedence over all other elements, and is the most focused part of the reading. Changing line 1 has the general context, inklings, just beginning to sense what could be involved or needed. Going back to our primary hexagram 31. Changing line, initiative or influence. Changing line 1, leg. The first line, magnetic, shows one moving her great toes. Wilhelm/Baines. The influence shows itself in the big toe. Blowfold, sensation in the toe. Lu, stimulation in the big toe. If you get this line, you will plan an undertaking, but if it is planned hastily, it will be difficult to carry out. Cleary 1, sensing in the big toe is inauspicious. The big toe can move but not walk. To feel something one cannot carry out is not right sensing. This is sensitivity that stirs the human mentality. Commentary, Confucius/Leg, her mind is set on what is beyond herself. Wilhelm/Baines, the will is directed outward. Blofeld, this implies that the will is fastened upon external matters. Ritzema/Karcher, purpose located outside indeed. Cleary 2, the aspiration is outside. Wu, his affection is outward. Leg, the first line is magnetic at the commencement of the figure. Although the fourth line is a proper correlate, his influence will be ineffective. However much she moves her toes, that won't enable her to walk. What is beyond herself is represented by the fourth line. There is the desire to influence, but no strength and or ability to do so. Notes and paraphrases, Sue. At the outset, something is beginning to happen which is not yet apparent to everyone. Wing, there is something in the air. Perhaps it's the beginning of a compelling attraction or an idea just coming to light. Whatever it is of little significance, since a great deal more must be done to make it a reality. Editor, although the image is simple, the concept behind it is not. Wilhelm's commentary suggests the idea of a hidden influence, a latent force within the situation, which has not yet become apparent. This energy is focused on what is beyond itself, i.e., it wants to become manifest, but as yet is not powerful enough to do so. There is a suggestion of impatience to take action. At its most neutral, the line can image a concern with something distant in time or space, even an abstract idea. Legg's Confucian commentary is a good paraphrase, a quote from M.E. Harding in Psychic Energy. In times of stress, physical or mental, he might astonish his friends and even himself by the undisciplined and primitive reactions that suddenly usurp the attitudes of the well-drilled persona. Such reactions do not come from the conscious part of the psyche. They arise from the non-personal part and reveal not the conscious character, but the stage of development that the non-personal psyche has reached. James DeCorn breaks changing line 1 down into 3 possible succinct definitions, A, B, and C. A, unseen forces work toward change, an image of a subliminal influence or latent energy. B, an image of a restless ego, a mind seething with great plans, schemes, or intentions. And C, don't cross your bridges until you come to them. We will get a randomly drawn verse from the Tao Te Ching while we sum the reading up. And what we just read just now reminds me of, I guess, don't count your chickens before they hatch, obviously. But being so focused on a goal that we potentially could miss the times of change that are happening. We do want to have in mind a goal or destination that lends direction to the changes. So bringing it back to our primary hexagram, 31 is influence. And it shows the trigram Dewey Laker Marsh, which could be called joy, above Gen Mountain, which could be called stillness. And without the mountain holding up the lake, there would just be mud throughout the lake, apparently. And this shows the 2 youngest siblings in the trigram family connecting, male and female. And it is the transition from the 2 different halves of the hexagrams. They have the 64 hexagrams right between 30 and 31. And the first section are natural things that happen in the natural realm or the world of nature, and then the last ones happen within the world of man. So we get this idea of the primal mother and primal father conjoining and the myriad things being produced. And then we go through all these changes in nature, and then we enter into the section where man comes into the scene, so to speak, as far as how the hexagrams are divided. And in it, we have this passion between the youngest siblings, that the passion is really great between the young when they are, they've got all the hormones going and they get into relationships. So there is that hexagram that we're dealing with, and then the one that puts that in a broader context, influence, direction of travel, and underlying issue that has to do with you and your relationship to it all, is hexagram 49, revolution. And it shows fire, the trigram Li, fire and light, below that of the trigram for lake, dewy lake or marsh. And it makes me think of the idea of lighting a fire under the people, because dewy lake or marsh is conversation, communication, both inner and outer, and has to do with people getting together and bringing things out and communicating with them, and share and exchange. And so there's this illumination or fire beneath people, causing there to be great transformation. And I'm going to look at, again, I-ming's Taoist I Ching for the commentary section about these real quick here. So 49, we just covered 31. 49 says change. Change is transformation. Above is lake, below is fire. There is fire in a lake. What superior people see in this is that as people establish their careers in the world, when they cannot achieve proper adjustment based on actualities and cannot adapt to the times, it is because they do not understand the principles of change, of the celestial Tao and the seasons of advance and withdrawal, of yin and yang. Therefore, superior people divide the various seasons of spring, summer, autumn, and winter, with their 24 energies in 72 periods, and thus make a calendar to show that the operation of the energies of the 5 elements each has its own time, to enable people to obey heaven and accord with the time, changing any element that is excessive so that it returns to correct balance. Heaven has its times of operation. People have times when they should act as the time changes. The way changes. So the way of change is the way of going along with the time. When one acts appropriately in concert with the time, action and inaction, preservation and elimination will not lose their proper balance. This too is one kind of celestial practice. And then in James DeCorn's Gnostic Book of Changes, about hexagram 49. Jeez. Click the right thing. There we go. He says in the notes and paraphrases, judgment, hidden within its cocoon, the caterpillar becomes a butterfly. Who would believe it until the metamorphosis was complete? The superior man recognizes that celestial sequences create changes only when they are due. He therefore acts in accordance with the requirements of the times. The 49th hexagram makes an analogy between the natural metamorphosis of animal pelts and the proper way to regard radical changes in government. Lines 1, 5, and 6 all refer to skin, and 2, 3, and 4 refer to politics. The general idea is that radical transformations occur at their own natural pace. They cannot be successfully forced any more than eggs can be made to hatch before their time. The image makes this point in its reference to the celestial correlation of the seasons. Once one assumes conscious responsibility for the work, there comes along an indefinite period in which one labors unceasingly without any visible results at all. Dream images and the I Ching meditations will indicate that progress is being made, but the ego's life in space-time consists of seemingly fruitless labor in the service of a transcendental ideal. This is a universal experience. It happens to everyone who undertakes the work. In the Western mystery tradition, it is known as the dark night of the soul. Psychologically interpreted, metamorphosis means that changes are taking place in the unconscious psyche, but don't expect them to manifest until their growth is complete. The ego must recognize this and persevere with the work, even when common sense counsels otherwise. It is a period of probation and trial, and many there are who fail the test. If there is any consolation in this terrible ordeal, it is that others have made the journey before you and survived. Keep the faith that in the imagery of this hexagram, the lower trigram of clear perception following the upper trigram of cheerfulness will lead you through the most challenging of all transformations. And in E.C. Whitmont, The Symbolic Quest, he quotes this: where the issue of ultimate meaning is constellated, transformation will eventually occur, even though only by way of a great deal of suffering. Our changing line 1, which puts a pin in the map to say you are here, at least here's some places you may find yourself, takes precedence over all the other elements, and is the most focused part of the reading. It shows the big toe. There's motion desirous in the big toe, like someone standing still and their big toe urging to push them forward. And the idea in it is that we're getting ahead of ourselves a little bit, that maybe the desire for an outcome that is satisfactory probably isn't going to be fully understood at this early stage in the game, that we dare not move forward without the impulse or the direction of the self, that the ego should not, like the big toe, urge the body forward before the time is ripe for that transformation and that urging forward to take place. So if you picture a young couple, full of lust and vivaciousness, ready to go, right? They, in a time of great transformation, when a lot of things can come about, oftentimes it feels like there's a lot stacked against us in that transformation, not only of our internal worlds, but the world at large, is necessary. In our primary hexagram, it also talks about, let me read it because it's actually super profound, in Liu I-ming's Taoist teaching. The idea that when people are young, they have the mind of Tao inherent within them, but when they get older, they lose it. Let's turn to the commentary section. I think that's where it said it. 31. Sensing means feeling. What superior people see in this is that just as there can be no lake atop a mountain if there is no space, similarly, people can't be sensitive to anything if their minds are not open. Therefore, they empty themselves of what they have and receive enhancement from another. The Taoist master Tzu Yang said, "Stop exercising clever artifice as though it were effective practice. recognize the other's method of immortality. The other is another person, but it does not mean an ordinary person in the world. It means the original immortal true person inherent in oneself. Because of mixing with acquired conditioning, it has run away and become ineffective. Long covered up and buried away, it is lost and does not return. Though it may show up occasionally, students who cling to the temporal, who stick to the conditioned, miss it even when it is right before them and are unable to sense it. This is all because of inability to refine the self. If one is unable to refine oneself, personal desires fill the being, and their sprouts clog the opening of awareness. Being filled and not open, whenever another comes, there is no room for reception. Superior people who practice the Tao refine themselves and master their minds, getting rid of all acquired pollutants so that their minds are open. When the mind is open, the primordial energy comes from nothingness, so that one can receive enhancement from the other and become fulfilled. One senses by openness, the other responds with fulfillment. The small goes and the great comes. The gold elixir of immortality spontaneously crystallizes. This is like a high mountain being empty and open on top and receiving the moisture of a lake. It happens spontaneously without any intention that it be so. And the changing line 1 in Lu I-ming's Taoist teaching, Hexagram 31, says, sensing in the big toe is inauspicious. Explanation: when one is foolish and low-minded, unable to refine the self and discipline the mind, to arbitrarily imagine great things is like sensing in the big toe. The big toe can move but not walk. To feel something one cannot carry out is not right sensing. This is sensitivity that stirs the human mentality. I just watched a really cool documentary, which I'd highly recommend, called The Divided Mind, or The Divided Brain. I'll put a link to it in the description box below. But it's a guy that looked into how people acted when they had a stroke on either side of their brain, when the stroke was confined or aneurysm or whatever to whichever side of the brain, and how that person behaved afterwards. And all kinds of study went into the idea that our modern Western culture acts largely from the left side, the left hemisphere of the brain, which in the context of this movie or documentary, they look at it as the part of the brain that zooms in and narrowly focuses on tasks and is able to put things together and create systems and do all the fine-tuning, and that the right hemisphere of the brain is that which is able to put those changes into context, into the greater world, and how that all fits together, and also align the changes to a desired outcome that is mutually beneficial. So basically, relating it similarly to this idea of the human mentality versus the mind of Tao, you might almost compare them like that we have so focused from the age where someone gets into school and starts learning how to go into the world and really focus on a specific task and direction in life, that we have so highly focused on developing that part of our brains and not so much the other part, which you might call the part that is able to understand poetry and appreciate it, that has the feelings that are evoked in poetry and music well up within us. Those kinds of things that aren't necessarily about studying the music to really find out all of the details of the notes and the meter and the rhythm and all that kind of stuff, but more so has the feeling of the whole song once it's composed and how that affects you, and what kind of space that brings you into, like a wider space. So the big toe trying to move might be the idea of trying to figure out what change needs to happen in the world in a time where great change is upon us and is necessary. But thinking that we know better and thinking that we might know what the end goal would look like and how to get there with the mind of the human mentality, versus waiting for the proper time to act. And it even talked about the sage developing a calendar and according action based on the changing of the times so that they fall in the right time frames. If life moves in cycles and we find that there are better times to take action and better times to wait, the importance becomes focused not so much on what we can think we should do to affect change, but in the right time to act and when action is required and when it is not. And even the right type of action, which is something that we can bring into our awareness by fostering that sense of the higher self, the capitalized self, that we do not fall for the the quick results and the idea that the ego is able to direct us. Like James DeCorn brought up, the self is able to see from a really broad spectrum across the whole landscape of what's going on, but is unable to act in the world on its own. And the ego is able to act in the world. It would be the point where the will is focused. We're able to aim our will with that ego self, but it has no ability to see the broader picture. So a lot of this really does compare to that that documentary. I highly recommend you to at least skim it through. But there is, I think it says, great indeed are the I know it's in James DeCorn's. Great indeed is something in the times of change. Metamorphosis, yes. So one of these commentaries says this. I think. Yeah. Great indeed is what takes place in a time of change. And I'll read this section. Confucius / like in metamorphosis, so this is our hexagram 49, a revolution. In metamorphosis, water and fire extinguish each other. When two daughters with opposing viewpoints live together, change is inevitable. But after the change is accomplished, faith is accorded to it. Clarity brings good cheer and progress through what is correct. When a transformation is properly accomplished, all occasion for regret disappears. Heaven and earth undergo their changes, and the four seasons complete their functions. The rulers of old transformed the state in accordance with the will of heaven and in response to the wishes of men. Great indeed is what takes place in a time of change. We will read verse 66 in the Tao Te Ching, which my copy is from Jia Fu Feng and Jane English. "66. Why is the sea king of 100 streams? Because it lies below them. Therefore it is a king of 100 streams. The king of 100 streams. If the sage would guide the people, he must serve with humility. If he would lead them, he must follow behind. In this way, when the sage rules, the people will not feel oppressed. When he stands before them, they will not be harmed. The whole world will support him and will not tire of him. Because he does not compete, he does not meet competition. This one too, Zash. Yggdrasil, I don't know how to say the tree that it is in Norwegian, I think it is. Context, or the Vikings, the world tree. That's what it represents, ash. Quite possibly because the trees were incredibly tall. It doesn't escape my notice that we got revolution right during the 4th of July, incidentally. I live in America, so I'm aware of American holidays. Anywho's, love y'all.